Let's talk about taxes. Now, I know a lot of you might say, how dare you? We pay our taxes. We pay taxes every time we go to the grocery store, every time we pay, every time we go to the petrol station. You're absolutely right. You do pay taxes, but you pay those taxes because you have to, not because you want to. And we want to talk about the kind of taxes that you don't want to pay, or which majority of the people really don't pay. We want to talk about direct taxes. Now, direct taxes could be your CGT, capital gains tax, or your income tax. We, for the sake of this video, will be focusing on income tax. Now, just to give you an idea of what income tax is, every year you go to the government, tell them, listen, this is the amount of money I've made, and according to your calculations, this is the amount of tax that I need to pay. Now, if your employer has a withholding tax element to it, the government can say, this is the amount of tax that we have received from your employer, this is how much you need to pay more, this is how much you need to pay less. That's income tax for you. But let's give you some statistics. So about 2.74 million Pakistanis are registered with the FBR for the sake of income tax. They don't all pay taxes, they're just registered, they're filers. That is about 4.1% of the entire workforce. So about close to 96% are non-filers. Now, it's important to understand why direct taxes are important. They are the best tool for the government to keep inflation and poverty in check. And I'll tell you why. Now, they're regressive. Direct taxes are regressive in nature. That means that if a person makes more money, he pays more taxes. And if a person makes less money, he pays less taxes. So that means I have certain purchasing power, and so does a poor person. But because he's paying less tax, that purchasing power comes up. So we, if not the same, have similar purchasing power to actually buy a commodity, maybe milk, oil, rice, whatever, right? So that means that person has a better chance of coming out of poverty. Number one. Number two, inflation. Now, if there is a focus more on direct taxes as opposed to indirect taxes, that means that a commodity will not be taxed as high and inflation is in check. So what is inflation? You increase in prices over time. If less price, more people can afford it. And that's why direct taxes are important. And that brings us to the question of the hour. Why don't Pakistanis want to pay tax? There are three major reasons. There might be many, but there are three major. Number one being, which is, you know what, these politicians or these officials are corrupt, and the more tax that we give them, the more richer they get. They'll buy those big ass houses in Europe or in Dubai. Absolutely, you're right. The other reason is that why should I pay taxes? What has the government done for us? Like, look at the health sector or the education sector. It's not good. Why should I pay taxes? They're not doing anything for us. And third is, why should I pay taxes? Because that tax money is going towards interest payments on a loan that I never approved. These three reasons are absolutely correct, but I think they're completely counterproductive, and I'll tell you why. Even though you don't want to pay direct taxes, that corrupt official still has money from your indirect tax revenue. So if he is corrupt and if he has the willingness to buy, he will go and buy those overseas properties. The other thing is that what has the government done for us? Yeah, the public health sector is not good, or the education sector is not good. But talking specifically about health, anyone who has lived in the UK or want to live in the UK, please read up on NHS. It does not matter how big an emergency you have to wait hours on end. I'm not saying it's worse than Pakistan, but it's not perfect. You don't even want to talk about the US health sector. It is worse. So this whole idea of government not giving money to the government to improve those facilities because they're not that good, it doesn't make sense. And the third one is, don't want to be paying taxes towards paying tax revenue towards a interest repayment, and that creates a vicious cycle, right? So you haven't paid your taxes, so the government doesn't have enough money, so the government borrows, and now they have to pay interest on that borrowed money, by the way, which the repayments are 25 billion this year, and we will be asking for some more money from the IMF, close to $6 to $8 billion. And that brings us to why the outcry for the non-filers. And let's talk about that Dawn news reporter, that senior reporter who did a monologue during that press conference, gave it to the man. Good on him. There was a whole ass applaud. There was a story about him, the story of his staff member who made less than 50,000 and didn't have a motorcycle or a car, and his mobile got disconnected, his connection got disconnected, and that's sad, and it's really sad. But he went further and said you should actually go after the news agency owners because they are paying cash. Now, that's cash right there. That's the problem. Why is it being not filers, not paying taxes, but becoming filers such a big problem? I heard another gentleman who said, he got all emotional and said, you know what if a non-filer wants to go overseas for medical reasons? And that's true. But it raises a question. If a person has enough resources to go overseas, does that person, what's stopping him from becoming a filer or paying taxes? It doesn't make any sense. The media is the last source that you have to go to right now, because they're all biased right now, because there's going to be GST imposed on newspapers, and the whole media fraternity is up in arms. So the aspect that we really are not talking enough about is the government really did try to help. The government did those amnesty schemes. They did generous income tax thresholds, right? So they tried to give generous thresholds in order for more people to come into the tax net. What happened was actually less tax revenue, so it didn't work. Now, the problem that I really want to talk about is that there's always this argument the government is not doing enough. Now it's creating problems for non-filers, and the whole country is after the government for doing the main thing that you've been asking for since history. So what is the result? We are in a vicious cycle. You don't pay taxes, so the government keeps on borrowing money from the IMF, and that 25 billion might turn into 30 billion or 35 billion or 40 billion. And a time would come that we truly will be bankrupt. We aren't now, but we will be. And that is the most important thing that Pakistanis need to understand. You have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.